Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something really incredible. We're going to distill 50 years of intense, world-changing life experience into just a few minutes. We're taking a deep dive into one of the most powerful speeches ever delivered, Steve Jobs' 2005 Stanford commencement address. The core insights from this speech were beautifully brought to a wider audience through a brilliant Hindi translation by Deepak Daya, and today, we're breaking down those exact universal lessons for you.
So let's jump right in with a pretty profound question. Can you actually absorb 5 decades of life lessons in just about 15 minutes? Well, the answer is an absolute yes, if you break it down the right way. People so often miss the sheer density of wisdom in this speech, sometimes just because they haven't had the core concepts laid out clearly in front of them. Today, we're going to remove all those barriers.
You know, Steve Jobs was a total master of simplicity, and he kept this monumental speech incredibly focused. He literally told the audience that his entire life's wisdom, we're talking all the soaring successes and the crushing defeats, could be summarized in just 3 core stories. That's it. Not some massive, complicated textbook of rules, just 3 pivotal narratives.
And that beautifully sets our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be looking at connecting the dots, love and loss, facing death, and finally, his legendary concluding advice to stay hungry, stay foolish. Let's see how each of these builds on the last.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Connecting the Dots.
So get this, Jobs' biological mom was an unwed grad student who really wanted him adopted by college graduates. But through a mix-up, he was actually adopted by working-class parents who scraped by, but promised they'd send him to college one day. Fast forward 17 years, and he accidentally chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford. Realizing he was completely draining his parents' life savings without any real direction, he just dropped out after 6 months. But here's the fascinating part. He spent the next 18 months dropping in on classes that actually sparked his curiosity, specifically calligraphy. He learned all about serif and sans serif typefaces, the subtle art of spacing, the whole shebang. Well, 10 years later, he baked all of that beautiful typography into the very first Macintosh.
But hey, let's be super clear here. This wasn't some glamorous startup journey. The reality of his situation was incredibly stark. He didn't have a dorm room, so he was literally sleeping on the floor in his friends' rooms. He returned glass Coke bottles just to get the 5-cent deposits so he could buy food. And every single Sunday night, he walked 7 miles across town just to get one good, solid meal a week at the local Hare Krishna temple. It was built on severe hardship, but following his curiosity during those incredibly tough times, rather than playing it safe, that was absolutely crucial to his later success.
Which brings us to this absolutely crucial point. Jobs realized it was literally impossible to connect the dots looking forward when he was a struggling college kid. But looking backward 10 years later, it was crystal clear. Think about it. If he hadn't dropped in on that single random calligraphy course, the Mac wouldn't have had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows basically just copied the Mac, no personal computer would have them. The lesson is, you've got to trust your gut, your destiny, your karma, whatever it is, and just deeply believe that your present actions are going to eventually connect in your future. Moving right along, let's look at Section 2, Love and Loss.
Okay, I want you to just imagine this for a second. You start a company in your parents' garage at 20 years old. By the time you're 30, it has exploded from just 2 guys into a $2 billion empire with 4,000 employees. You've just released your absolute finest creation, the Macintosh. And then, boom, you get fired. I mean, how do you even get fired from the company you created? Well, he hired a CEO to help run things. They eventually had a massive falling out over their visions for the future, and the board of directors sided with the CEO. Jobs was out. It was a very public, devastating failure. But here's the twist. The incredibly heavy burden of being successful was suddenly replaced by the sheer lightness of being a beginner again. It completely freed him up to enter one of the most creative periods of his entire life.
By fully embracing that lightness, he kicked off this phenomenal sequence of rebirth. Over the next 5 years, he started a company named Next. Then he started another company named Pixar, which went on to literally change the world by creating the first computer-animated feature film, Toy Story. They became the most successful animation studio on the planet. He also met the amazing woman who would become his wife. And then, in this wild twist of fate, Apple actually bought Next, bringing Jobs right back to the company he founded, where he used the very technology he developed while he was away to save Apple from bankruptcy. So the ultimate takeaway from this devastating loss is brilliantly simple. Never, ever stop searching for the work that truly fulfills you. Jobs realized the only thing that kept him going after being publicly fired was that he still genuinely loved what he did. He noted that your work is going to fill a massive part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work? You gotta love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Do not settle.
Okay, Section 3. Facing death.
When he was just 17, Jobs read a quote that went something like, "If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." That made a massive impression on him. For 33 years, he'd look in the mirror every single morning and ask himself, if today were my last day, would I really want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer was no for too many days in a row, he knew he immediately needed to change something.
And you know, this daily practice got incredibly real for him about a year before this speech. Just think about this insane single day he went through. At 7:30 in the morning, a scan showed a tumor on his pancreas. The doctors basically told him it was almost certainly incurable and that he should expect to live maybe 3 to 6 months tops. They told him to go home and put his affairs in order, which, let's be honest, is doctor code for prepare to die. He lived with that absolute death sentence all day long. But then, that evening they did a biopsy, taking cells from the tumor. And when the doctors looked at those cells under a microscope, they actually started crying. Why? Because it turned out to be a super rare form of pancreatic cancer that is actually curable with surgery. He had the surgery, and he survived.
Having looked death right in the eye, he had this profound realization. Death is very likely the single best invention of life. It is life's ultimate change agent. Jobs noted that remembering you are going to die is the absolute best way to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is literally no reason not to follow your heart. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. And definitely not let yourself get trapped by dogma, which is just living with the results of other people's thinking.
Which brings us to our final section. Stay hungry, stay foolish.
I'm sure you've heard this phrase before. Stay hungry, stay foolish. It's echoed all around the world. Jobs originally saw it on the back cover of the final issue of the Whole Earth catalog in the 1970s. It was their farewell message. But let's really break down what he meant by it, because it's not just some catchy bumper sticker. It's a profound operating system for life.
Let's look at that first half. To be hungry means having this relentless, burning desire to achieve, to discover, and to do something truly meaningful. It means never losing that intense drive and ambition, no matter how comfortable your life gets or how ridiculously successful you might become. It is the absolute refusal to just coast. It's that exact same engine that kept him searching for what he loved, even after losing his own company.
And then you have the second half. To be foolish means totally rejecting the arrogance of being an expert. It's all about staying humble and open enough to admit you just don't know everything, ensuring you never, ever stop learning. It's maintaining that beginner's mindset, much like Jobs did when he dropped out of his required classes just to learn about calligraphy, or when he found that incredible lightness of starting all over again with Next and Pixar. Look, if you think you know it all, you just stop growing. You have to be willing to risk looking foolish if you want to do something truly innovative.
As we wrap up this explainer on one of history's absolute greatest speeches, I really want to leave you with this one thought. We've seen how a random calligraphy class shaped modern computing, how getting fired built an animation empire, and how facing death completely clarifies life's purpose. But it all comes back to the dots you are making right now. Are you trusting your intuition? Are you staying hungry and foolish enough to build the life you actually want? Thank you so much for joining me on the explainer today. Now go out there and make some dots worth connecting.